All right. Let me know when you guys can hear me, both in the live chat, but then also, of course, in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord. And then we can get started. As this should be a really interesting one for you guys, I gotta say. Interesting for me too. I'm always excited um, when I have truly cool things to talk about with you all. All right, let's see. All right. Video good, audio good. Everyone's saying we're all good here. All right. Well, here we are. Welcome to the Moore's Law is Dead live stream at the end slash beginning of every month. This one, of course, covers all the things that were covered in January, but as always seems to happen for the past year or so, I have some stuff to disclose to you that can't wait until next week. So this loose ends will kick off with a leak or two as well. And let me just send one message here. Give everyone a chance to make sure they are in the chat and ready to go. Da, da, da. All right, and then let's get started. And as always, I give out the disclaimer. Um, I'm going to do this for like 1 to 2 hours. If you are not a member of the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon and you did not, therefore, get to submit a question ahead of time, feel free, or if you just want to send, an extra tip for the work that this channel does. Remember, it's not just me; it's Dan, Gerard, the audio edit engineer, Carbon Cry. Important for this episode, John Philippe, who models products that I leak to you all that we're not safe to share raw pictures of. You're paying all those people when you give us a tip here on the live chat, and do not hold back. Put in those questions in the live chat now. A tip question will make you more likely to be noticed. And if you do, I will go through those as I go through all of the stuff that I have to get to today. But all right, without further ado, let's get to some of those leaks, everybody, because yeah, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And I believe we will just start with the bad news. Put a timestamp to this for all of those people in the future who do not watch it live. And here we go. And here we are. So this is the first leak I want to get to today, and that is regarding RTX 5070 Ti and 5070. So I'll just quote the source here. This person told me, and this is someone who's been very reliable on a lot of leaks recently. The 5070 Ti is ending up 5 to 15 to 10% faster than the 4070 Ti Super and Raster, around 8 to 15% faster in ray tracing. Now, I'll just cut in right here and say that's a little bit better if this is one data point, but if this turns out to be the average performance of the 5070 Ti, this is actually slightly better than I expected. I know I did some napkin math on a video and got a really low number, but I was expecting that to be a low ball. That's like 5%, which I guess is still within the range kind of what I just said. But yeah, I mean, look, this thing's going to be weaker than the 4080, maybe notably so in some reviews. But I don't know. It looks like it'll be maybe on average 10% faster, depending on if you're talking about ray tracing or rasterization. And so I still don't think that's very exciting, frankly, because you could have gotten something better than this, the 7900 XT for months, but it has more RAM that costs less than this is going to cost. And yeah, it will cost. The 7900 XT at 650 recently is less than this because, well, yes, I can confirm what other leaks have said already, that this should launch on February 20th, according to this source. From what I am hearing, supply is not going to be good. Now, do I know an exact number yet? No, I probably will in about a week. But early indications from my sources in retail and distribution are that the 5070 Ti, look, I'll have more supply than the 5090. It's not really saying a whole lot because the 5090, I think, may have had less supply than the 3090 did at launch. But I don't even know if it's gonna be as much as the 5080, and if it is, it's gonna be more in the 5080 ballpark, I believe. It's not going to be remotely enough to meet demand, especially when you look around eBay right now, and you can see that tons of these graphics cards, even from last gen, like 4080s, are selling well above MSRP because supply is just gone. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think for the 5070 Ti, overall, get ready for another depressing launch of little supply, underwhelming performance, and teeing up RDNA 4 once again for a lot of hype. But honestly, the 5070 kind of worries me more. If I go back to this quote here from a source, the person tells me that as for the 5070, it looks pretty bad. Maybe this isn't indicative of the average, but the benchmarks, it was only a handful, but the benchmarks this source saw suggested only 10 to 20% faster performance. And then I responded to them and they confirmed, yes, than the 4070, not the 4070 Super. Calling into question once again, not only if this will match the 4070 Ti, but if it will even match the 4070 non-super. And ray tracing sounded like it was trading blows with the, I don't know. This person said 4070. So hopefully this is a bad outcome. Hopefully these are the worst case scenarios for benchmarks. But that's what this person told me. I don't know. This looks like another ray tracing to raster regression. This looks like something where they're just basically slotting this in where the 4070 already was with a slight performance bump. And the only saving grace for the 5070, relatively speaking, it still seems pretty bad to me, but the only saving grace for the 5070 to me is that it seems like it will probably launch around RDNA 4 and maybe make sure AMD has to be aggressive because, and this, I want to be clear, this part here, not part of the leak. This is speculation. I'm also hearing, well, wait, this part isn't speculation. I'm also hearing that the 5070 will launch at the end of February or the beginning of March or around there. So that's not speculation. That's what I'm told. But the speculation part, I still suspect the 5070 may have more supply at launch and that Nvidia's goal here may be to like launch a week before the RDNA 4 with a ton of supply. But again, I don't know that for a fact. And I have to say, if the 5070 has very bad supply. I mean, honestly, if the 5070 even has only twice the supply of the 5080, which wasn't a whole lot, it's another dud of a launch because that's going to push up prices above $600. And this thing might not even be better than the 4070 Super overall. And I just don't think this is what gamers were hoping for when Nvidia announced a $550 5070 card. It's not faster than the 5090, the 4090. They'll be lucky if it's faster than the 4070 Super. It just doesn't seem very good. But that is my update for the 5070 and the 5070 Ti. Again, I don't want to communicate bad news, but I just report the news, good or bad. Now, moving on from Nvidia to AMD, and don't worry, I'm going to get to the Zen 6 launch. Yes, I'm going to show you a picture of Zen 6. So, wait, we're going to get to that, but I'm just going in order here. The next thing I want to talk about very briefly, and it is RDNA 4, which I am also hearing like other people have leaked already. So I know I'm not the first, but I can confirm it that it is going to launch early March. And I do believe supply is going to be very good. And I'm still hearing very good things about performance. And so, yeah, look, if you're waiting to get a graphics card right now, I really wouldn't buck. I mean, look, if you want the best performance, if you can find a 5090 for under $2,500, and you have money to burn, I'm not condoning these prices, guys. I'm not Nvidia. I'm not the one saying these cards should cost as much. I've been raging against increasing GPU prices this channel's entire life. And anytime I try to explain it, a couple of people act like I'm condoning it. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying, 5090 for less than $2,500. It's probably the best you're going to get for months. I'm hearing very bad things about 5090 supply. Although I guess I'll let you guys know this. I have heard that there could be a drop of hundreds of 5090s on Micro Center within a couple weeks. So, look for it. It's coming supposedly, but it's not remotely enough. Hundreds is nothing, guys. I mean, usually these graphics cards have like 50,000 cards in every region and then resupplies of tens of thousands every other week or something. $500 is a drop in the bucket. So that's why I say if you can get a 5090 for under 2,500 and you know, really need it or have the money to burn, I guess, that's the best you're going to do. Everything else, I would just wait though. The 5080, don't pay over 1,000. 5070 Ti, don't get it. It's going to probably be humiliated by RDNA 4. And the 5070 just kind of looks like I don't know. Yeah, like it kind of looks like a 4070 replacement. That's really all it is. It has a smaller die than the 4070 did. Don't it's barely stronger. I really am very disappointed actually in that. And so, like I just said, RDNA 4 should launch early March with good supply. I would just wait for that. All right. Now, before I get to the Zen 6 leak, that I know you are waiting for, I must say that this live stream is sponsored by Micro Center. Like I just said, keep your eyes open for the online, I was actually told, Micro Center store. They will supposedly be getting a drop of 5090s, and this month is BYO month. You can click the links in the description to support Moore's Law is Dead and check out all of their best deals at Micro Center News. There's a link for that. They also have a link for trading in and recycling your old products, not just graphics cards, just motherboards, anything else you have. And they also have early signups for Micro Center Santa Clara. If you sign up for early access, even if you're already a Micro Center, you already have an account, you don't even need to be a new user. They'll just give you a free 128 gigabyte flash drive for signing up for information about that new location. And once again, I don't know really what else there is to say about Micro Center. I think they have the best deals. Um, if you look at the launches for these products, as horrible as the Blackwell launch supply was, I think they had the best supply of it and the most reasonable prices for most of these. So if you want a new graphics card, you know, they already have RDNA 4 in their back rooms actually as well. Like, check out Micro Center. Now I do believe is the time to buy if you want to buy anything this year. It's a very uncertain geopolitical world right now. I would not wait if you want to upgrade your CPU and motherboard, especially, or if you're holding out with a 3080 here. Just get RDNA 4 right away. And literally, I think almost exactly 1 month right now. Do so at Micro Center. And again, make sure you use those links in the description if you want to get information or get products at Micro Center. You'll be supporting Moore's Law is Dead if you do. So, yep, support us by checking out Micro Center today. All righty, now we can move on here to the goods. The goods I know you all want to see that were in the thumbnail. We've gotten through the depressing news. Let's get to the fun news here. And let me just move over once again to my bizarre way of showing you guys data on live streams, although I insist on still doing it this way. All right, so first a recap here. This right here, this was a very important video that came out I don't know. I want to say at the very beginning of this year or something, maybe late last year. And I know it looks a little weird here, but this mock-up here, this was based on something I'd seen, or let's leave it at that. And I know it was just, I'll tell you, it's based on some like Intel CPU that I overlaid part of like an AMD chiplet and something else for the mock-up. But this is generally speaking what I was expecting Medusa point to look like. And it's important that I put this leak out though, because I was recently messaged by someone at AMD, someone I've been talking to for a little bit, that wanted to let me know, by the way, they can confirm that the Medusa point video I put out is correct. It does have a 12-core Zen 6 chiplet that interfaces with a large IO die chiplet, large for what a point would be, that is. It's not as big as Halo's. And then there will also be a Halo and desktop variant of Medusa that seems to share the same 12-core CCD chiplet. Now, if I may just interject here, this is very important. I've long leaked that AMD initially intended Strix to use chiplets and actually to be on 3 nanometer. They initially did intend, I think they intended to have a 4 nanometer IO die and then a 3 nanometer chiplet, one chiplet for Strix point. So I guess it would have just used 8-core normal cores. And then 2 of those for Strix Halo, again, 3 nanometer. And then they were going to use 3 nanometer chiplets probably for desktop. Now, they had problems with 3 nanometer. They were worried about time to market, especially with Intel falling apart. And frankly, I was told they had a ton of design problems as well that then further delayed it. So Strix Point became monolithic so that it could launch on time. And if you look around, it launched first. Strix Point came out before Zen 5 Desktop, probably should have come out more before it. I think Zen 5 Desktop should have come out months later than it did. It clearly wasn't ready. And then Strix Halo, of course, came out after both of them. This was always the plan, though, eventually, to move to chiplets for all of, or maybe not all, but more of the APU lineup. And I am now told by multiple sources at AMD, this is happening with Medusa. And I know this, the people complaining about the 16-core stagnation. 24 cores, baby. 24 cores. I've already leaked that, but I'm leaking it again. 24 cores on desktop with Zen 6, 12 cores on laptop, 12 full cores, not 4 plus 8 or something. 12 full Zen 6-core chiplets shared between Medusa Point, Medusa Halo, and yes, Medusa Ridge. It is one family of Zen 6 that is going to be sharing this. And that's just, I'm not 100% sure on this, but it seems like it's probably 3 nanometer for that chiplet. But there will also be 2 nanometer chiplets, I believe, with 32 cores as well. Well, I know there will be. I've leaked diagrams of that already for Venice. So that's, and I believe there might be a third variant of chiplet. So I don't know what the overall options are. No, I don't think they can bring 64 cores of Zen 6C to desktop. The chiplets are way too big, the 32 core ones, but there could be other options. And I think this is very exciting. Now, do you all see why this would also be exciting? Think about it. They're sharing the same 12 core chiplet, might have Vcache on it. So I'm told that that decision hasn't been made though. Hear me here. Listen very carefully. I'm told by people at AMD, I even double asked, one of the reasons I was late, by the way, I double checked with someone at AMD before I started the live stream. This person does not see references to a Medusa Point X3D yet. So I'm not promising you there will be Vcache APUs across the board from Halo to Point to desktop, but they could do it. They could definitely do it now. And I think that's very, very exciting. Again, I want you guys to think about what the leap will probably be from Strix Point to Medusa Point. We're going from 4 Zen 5C plus 8, no, sorry, 4 Zen 5 plus 8 Zen 5C to 12 full Zen 6. I mean, I don't know what it'd be in single threading uplift, but I would guess probably 10 to 15%. But in multi-threading for laptop, I mean, what is that going to probably be? 30, 50% uplift there? I don't know. That's going to be very exciting once again. Now, expect many more leaks about Zen 6, all members of its family, to come out for me over the next couple of months. I'm only touching the tip of the iceberg on what I know in this video, but I thought I wanted to get it out to you because it's exciting, right? Um, but what I will oh god, I'm losing my train of thought here. But what I will say is that what I will say though is that I'm still unsure how big the graphical uplift will be for Zen 6 Medusa Point over Strix Point. And that's because the diagrams I've seen so far seem to suggest it still just has 16 compute units. But the IO die slash GPU die is brings the total silicon for Zen 6 Medusa to seemingly around 275 millimeters squared. That's like 20 to 30% larger than Strix Point, despite using better nodes. That to me would suggest on that IO die, they have room for something. Now, is it just going to be a big neural engine that no one cares about? I, 50-50, that's the only reason it's bigger, honest to God. But I do think there's a decent chance there's more cache here, and just I don't think going from like 16 compute units with Strix Point to hypothetically 24 with Medusa Point would be as big of a deal, at least for gaming, maybe for compute, but at least for gaming, as it would be to just even give it 8 megabytes of infinity cache. And maybe they're giving it 16. I think going from like RDNA 3.5 to like RDNA 5 with Medusa Point, same amount of compute units, that alone would probably give you a 10-20% boost in performance. Then adding infinity cache, again, I'm not confirming they are. Still trying to learn more here to confirm it, but that to me would be a better use of die space than adding more compute units right now. You know, if you want to beat Intel in tops, don't make a giant GPU and brag about Lunar Lake's combined tops performance for AI. Just give it a bigger neural engine and give it more cache for the GPU, because clearly Strix Point is held back by bandwidth, not held back by having more compute units. It's painfully obvious, actually. So without further ado, though, I guess let me add a timestamp for this, as I've been yammering for quite a while now. I gave you the details. Let me go over. All right, so there's that quote again. And hopefully I can fix the exposure. And I know it's weird that I am leaking this uh, via this method, but let me just do this. There you go. Fixed it. But I'm doing this because it's not done. I'm still working with multiple sources. I know the die sizes of these products. I know the this layout is exactly how it looks, actually. And I'm working on like the rough mock-up of the package. So it is actually intentional right now by me that this is a little grainy and not as clear as it could be. That's what I'm trying to do to tease you guys for the big full renders I'm going to have, not just of this, but of other Zen 6 products very soon. So, but I thought today, why not show you guys, right? Why not tease it? Like, here you go. This is what Medusa Point should look like. with the FP10 socket. And there you go, a fairly large IO die, a 12-core Zen 6 CCD. And yes, two of those with a smaller IO die should be used for the AM5 variant. Let me tell you something, everybody. That AM5 variant, it's got a larger, let's leave it at that. We'll start teasing there. It's got some tricks up its sleeve as well, as far as I can tell. And yes, I do have a general idea of the performance of Medusa Halo as well. So make sure right now you like this video. There's 1,600 people watching. Like the video and subscribe to this channel because I'm going to have a lot more coming out within a week, I believe, on these products. High quality pictures, and I think you're going to want to be subscribed to this channel to see them. And so there you go. I think I just couldn't wait. It's not done. I'm still piecing together the final details of the specs with my sources and how exactly it looks. But I couldn't help but show you guys an early stage of the stuff me and Jean-Philippe, who is a member of the Moore's Law is Dead team, is working on. And on that note, I just want to say this to be clear, everybody. That costs money. That costs money for me to pay someone to render things, to work with contributors that spend time analyzing things. So consider joining the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon because there's so many things some people can't show you because it's not safe. And I don't know any few people. Some people do. I've seen it once in Blue Moon. I know few channels that take the time to pay people to construct renders of stuff that they've spent weeks of time cross-referencing information from sources. This is how I'm able to get you guys sometimes pictures of products like MI300, for example, years ago, without even having the picture. I'll be honest on some of them. I can just take what people know about specs, take what people know about what they've seen. Like NDA, well, not NDA, I should say, but like they're in some closed room. They saw it briefly at some conference and it's in their head. And then I pay people to render it and cross-reference that with people at AMD and go, is this what it looks like? So, again, for anyone wondering, that was not something taken from AMD. That was just created out of talking to people. And that takes money and time. So please support Moore's Law is Dead. If you're not going to give us a tip, please join the Patreon. And if you do so, you can ask free questions as well, which I am about to get to. And one other final thing here. Check the link in the description. I was interviewed by a gaming website about the Nintendo Switch 2. I think it would be very cool if everyone watching this live stream would go in the description, click on that link, and show them that if Moore's Law is Dead is supported by a website, that you will give them views. But yeah, so shout out to, what is it, gamer.nl for interviewing me for the Switch 2 and what I know about that as well. All right, let me see what these tipped questions are first. I saw at least a couple there. All right, let me see here. All right, so that's an NVIDIA question. So we will, two NVIDIA questions I'm seeing here. So let me hold those and just start getting into GPU questions. Let me see. Pick timestamp right here. All right. Another Chris writes in, hopefully he finds the first Chris, and says, do you think AI compression algorithms will create interesting artifacts, or do you think they'll be stable? Yeah, I think there's no way around this, guys. If you're going to have compression of textures, there's going to be times where there are just bizarre artifacts. And so how many? I don't know. There's a lot of questions that I have about NVIDIA's texture compression, like neural texture compression. I just find it hard to believe they're going to be able to keep the same quality and like somehow make it take up 8 times less space. And hear me out. Even if they have, and if I'd love to be wrong, if I'm wrong, wow, I'll be impressed. Genuinely, I will be very impressed with NVIDIA. But let's say you take something that would normally take up, and we have to be careful what we mean by this, right? When we say things like a texture would normally take up 12 gigabytes of RAM, are you talking without compression? There's already compression, right? Oodle, which is used by multiple game devs, both for PC. It's got Oodle tech built into the PS5 and PS5 Pro. I mean, I don't remember the numbers on that, but that can compress textures multiple times, my understanding is. So when NVIDIA says this can, like neural texture compression, can compress textures like 8 times or whatever. Are they talking from the raw video file that not does not take into account the fact that we could already compress it like 50 times, like 10 times with Oodle or something, or whatever the number is? That's the questions that I have with AI texture compression. And I would be blown away if they could even go from like 12 to 8 gigabytes lossless. But if you actually look at the texture compression pictures Nvidia put out when they announced Blackwell, it wasn't lossless. It was very obviously not lossless. And I think it's going to be an interesting balance. I think it'll be less about artifacts, although I could be wrong. Who knows? And there always could be weird artifacts. I think it's gonna be less about artifacts and more about the fact that if you use texture compression, you're going to, as long as you're 30 feet away, probably not notice. But if you're crawling under a building in, a game like The Last of Us or Tomb Raider or something, uh, all of a sudden the rocks look crappy in an open world game because they compress them. But then it's like, how much will they be compressed? Like if you have a 5090, my assumption is the way this will work is it compresses it as much as it needs to, depending on how much RAM you have. And so maybe that would just be an argument that this works better than a bunch of popping. I don't know. But I would be less worried about artifacts and more worried about blurry houses on 8 gigabyte cards that we already have. So yeah, we'll see. But the other question I would have actually about this as well is how much horsepower does this take, right? Like, anyone remember RTX IO? NVIDIA in 2020 brags about RTX IO and how it allows NVIDIA graphics cards to stream textures like the PS5 can, and then neglects to tell you also the PS5 and to a lesser extent Xbox Series has their own IO controller, so that doesn't give you a performance hit, or at least not as much of one as otherwise in the case of Xbox. Like, so if I compress to textures, does this mean that I can run ultra textures, but they're sometimes blurry, but I'm getting another 20% hit in performance? Because if you use RTX IO, everyone's complaining about performance hits in games right now. So I don't know. That's my issues and concerns about neural texture compression, right? Adding an extra 4 gigabytes of RAM is like $20. Like, I don't think it would be that hard for NVIDIA to give you guys enough RAM. And instead, this neural compression, maybe it'll be impressive, but is it going to be a situation where 4060s lose 20% performance, which is better, by the way, than losing all of your performance if you go over 8 gigabytes? But are you going to lose 20-30% performance to still have slightly blurrier textures when you turn on Ultra? That's my concern more than artifacts. All right, let's see here. Da, 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 da. Sheriff Lofty writes, and hey, Moore's Law is dead. If AMD makes their pricing aggressive for both their 9070 and 9070 XT, it could really force NVIDIA to lower prices. We'll see. I feel like NVIDIA might just play chicken with AMD and not lower prices right away, just see if it matters at first. But he says, and focus on driver optimization. However, if AMD really did make a 32 gigabyte variant of some sort, do you believe NVIDIA could lower the prices of both the 24 gigabyte variant of the 5080 and, well, there's no 24 gigabyte variant of either the 58 or 5090 yet? Well, my suspicion is the way NVIDIA, if RDNA 4 does end up as impressive as it seems like it might, my suspicion is NVIDIA's response is going to be flooding 5060 and 5070 supply, because we saw this work with the 4060, kind of, right? Like the 4060 and 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte did end up selling pretty well to the people who don't pay attention to reviews, which is probably most PC gamers. My suspicion is they will fight AMD quality with NVIDIA volume. Um, and if they really had to launch some 5080 Ti, and I think I've talked about this in the Moore's Law Z Discord a lot recently, which you get access to for just $2 a month on the Patreon. But my suspicion will be if RDNA 4 is so good it's about a 5080 in performance, NVIDIA will launch a 5080. Well, what would they probably do? Actually, I'm not sure. Like, my suspicion is my suspicion is they would launch a 5070 Ti Super that is basically the same performance as a 5080 for like $800, and then also launch a 5080 Ti 16 gigabyte. But hear me out. 5090 uses a 512-bit bus. If NVIDIA really wanted to go performance while saving money on RAM, they could launch a 16 gigabyte model of the 5090, call it the 5080 Ti, and put it down at like 1200, probably not 1200, $1,500 or something. The way they could justify that is it would be the absolute worst yields of GB202. and still only 16 gigabytes of RAM. Because of that, AI people aren't going to buy this. They're still going to buy the 5090. That would be Nvidia playing hardball, I think. Now, if AMD's RDNA 4 doesn't threaten them as much, but they're still threatened, my suspicion would be that there would be a 5080 Ti 24 gigabyte that's basically just an overclocked 5080, with more RAM. And then same thing though, there'd still be like a 5070 Ti Super. That's about the performance of a 5080. But I think that's their two options. I don't see them dropping the price of the 5090 though. Um, and if they launch a 24 gigabyte 5080, I don't know. I find it hard to believe it would be $800, right? I mean, I guess who knows? A 5080 Super for $800 with 24 gigabytes. Wow, would that mean they're scared of RDNA 4? But I just feel like Nvidia is going to be willing to ignore AMD and see if they can get away with it this time. They're focused on the AI market. I really think a Jensen would probably calculate if RDNA 4 is a complete home run and there's a 32 gigabyte golden edition of the 9070 XT and AMD's just going crazy. If that happens, Nvidia will just swamp 60 series and 70 series supply to just try to outsell AMD by volume anyways, and see if anything happens. Like, go, hey, we're focused on AI. We're going to give a lot of the small dies to the market to keep market share. We're not get maybe price the 5060 super aggressively, and we're just not going to care about the high end because they're not competing there anyways. And we're just going to see if anyone notices or cares. And they'll say the worst thing that will happen is AMD will go from 20 to 30% market share, which will be great for them, but we won't really care if we're dominating AI. That's really how I see Nvidia responding to this sort of thing. Um, Career Boom writes in and says, "What's with the rumors about the 5060 Ti 8 gigabyte and 5060 8 gigabyte? I thought Nvidia was going to wait for 3 gigabyte modules before releasing the 60 series, so as to not have anemic graphics cards this time." Well, number one, this would to me suggest they just want to rush out a 60 series and 60 Ti series anyway. Maybe, and who knows? Maybe they'll have neural texture compression ready by the time they launch them and try to argue that's good enough. But I never said that I was sure of a 12 gigabyte card. I was told by someone actually that Nvidia reps were saying there should be 12 gigabyte versions of the 5060. But that was never promised. So I don't know what to say besides that. I will say this. I don't know what you guys want me to say. If Nvidia launches a 5060 Ti 16 and 8 gigabyte again, I think it's weird. So um, I always thought they would do something different, but you never know with Nvidia, I guess. It just seems odd to me. The person goes on, also, do you have any news on NVIDIA's answer to AMD's chiplet technology and Intel's tile technology? NVIDIA's answer to AMD chiplet. I just see Radeon finally having its Ryzen moment if NVIDIA is trapped on monolithic designs. NVIDIA's kind of using chiplets now, right? Like, I don't think it's fair to say like B200 is chiplets when they're just taking the same die and making it a giant monolithic one that's bigger than the reticle limit. That's really not the same thing as chiplets. But with digits, remember, I leaked. Go to the Moore's Law YouTube channel and look and search NVIDIA APU. I just put out a leak that NVIDIA digits is the start of an NVIDIA chiplet APU family. So that is their answer. It looks like they're going to have several IO dies, and then they're going to have several CPU dies, and they're going to mix and match them to make an entire lineup for laptop. So that seems to be NVIDIA's answer right now. And again, speaking to people at NVIDIA, they like monolithic. They don't see a need to go as crazy with chiplets as AMD or certainly Intel is doing. And so I think what they're going to do is just, yeah, two chiplets for some products every now and then, but for the most part, monolithic. And I think NVIDIA thinks they're making the right decision. Um, Let me see here. Let me get to these questions actually as well. Let me write down some time stamps for that. What did I just talk about? NVIDIA chiplets. And then I also talked about duh, duh, duh. Let's see here. Oh yeah, NVIDIA response. And then now let's get to 5090 Founders Edition. Shay writes in from the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon and says, "Why do you think NVIDIA over-engineered the 5090 Founders Edition air cooler rather than just water cooling it?" And then Mr. Reinterpret Cast writes in with a tipped question. Thank you for the tip. From Europe, saying, "For how long will they produce 5090 Founders Editions in Europe? And will they stick to the 4 nanometer node forever for this series?" I think so, yeah. I know the plan was supposed to be on 3 nanometer. Yeah, it's an interesting question and thought, right? Like if they initially planned Blackwell to be 3 nanometer and they did, Like, is there some secret 3 nanometer family they could save for a refresh? I guess it's plausible they could do that, but for now, I think it's just 4 nanometer. And I think you have to remember the reasons why NVIDIA um, went to 4 nanometer. It was for time to market, which is funny. Let's cover how funny that is, by the way. And to allow Vera Rubin AI products to just have 3 nanometer to themselves, right? Like I leaked, yep, and I think other people did too, maybe even some people before me, that Rubin was like Hopper, AI and compute only, never for gaming, and that was going to be on 3 nanometer. And then Blackwell was supposed to be on 3 nanometer, but NVIDIA went, well, if we can pull up Rubin to launch as soon as possible, which they're trying to, although I don't know how well that's actually going, well, then why would we launch a 4 nanometer Blackwell and then like 6 to 8 months later, which was the original plan? Well, not 8 months, not 6, but maybe 8 to 10 months later, Vera Rubin also, on the same node, like we can't do that. So they pushed Blackwell to 4 nanometer to try to launch it as soon as possible. But then the funny thing is, number one, Google it, by the way, NVIDIA has even admitted they screwed up. I believe it was packaging or something for Blackwell. And so now Blackwell for AI is delayed. And so maybe they should have kept it on 3 nanometer. I don't know. And then also Vera Rubin's having some issues. I don't know if it's having issues. It doesn't seem to be launching as soon as they intended it to launch, though. And also, they pushed back the Blackwell gaming launch to allow for Lovelace to sell out. And it's just funny because the whole reason Blackwell's on 4 nanometer, or not the whole, but half of the reason. Yes, half of it was like 4 nanometer just seemed like it made more sense, and 3 nanometer was having issues, but a lot of it was time to market. 3 nanometer works fine now, and it doesn't seem like it launched sooner rather than later. So it is a funny thing to think about. You know, this idea of like moving Blackwell to 4 nanometer, like they moved Maxwell to 28 nanometer, so you can launch sooner rather than later, and that didn't even happen. All right, let me see here. I know there's another tipped question. Mexi Man and Cheese writes in, longtime viewer, I remember this name, says, I agree that Nvidia phoned this generation in, probably because they expected sales in AI. Do you think a deep seek is throwing a wrench in their plans? Yes, a little bit at least. And maybe we'll get another super series. Yeah, we might get another super series, especially because I think there's a okay chance that like RDNA 5 comes out before the follow-up to Blackwell is ready. But whenever people talk about, do you think there will be a Blackwell super series, just remember it's not coming out in 2 months. Best case scenario is end of this year, and for being honest, probably early next year is when a Blackwell Super Series would come out. So I wouldn't put much stock in it for now. Just like Nvidia won't put much stock in gaming graphics cards. We continue to see the other questions here. Got a tip from Beanie King. Thank you. And then we have more questions here. So let me get to this one as well. RB Racer writes in and says, thanks. I love the content. Well, thank you for the giant tip, my friend. Do you believe AMD's RDNA 4 will truly challenge NVIDIA's 50 series? Yes, I do. I absolutely think that it will. Let me put down a timestamp for this. RDNA 4 versus RTX 50 series. How will NVIDIA respond? Pretty much already answered that. Jensen Wang despises losing and won't want to give AMD any breathing room. Well, I already answered. You probably asked this question before I answered it already from other questions, RB Racer. But just to reiterate in case, because you did give quite a kind tip here for the team. My suspicion, and it's a suspicion, is that NVIDIA will flood 70 and 60 series because the die sizes are small. Remember, the 5070 uses a smaller die size than the 4070 and 4070 Ti did. It was kind of purpose built to almost get to 4070 Ti performance with a cheaper product. So my suspicion would be they would just tell AIBs you can sell below MSRP. Let the 5070 go to 500 or less, and then they just swamp supply and do the same with the 5060. That is what I think they would do. I don't see them doing official price drops. NVIDIA hasn't done that for a very long time. So that would surprise me if they did. And I don't think they're going to do a refresh of new products for at least a few months. And let's be honest, probably 6 to 12 months from now. So for now, I think they're just going to try to see if their marketing, their brand power, and swamping supply can beat a better product. But yes, it's going to challenge the 5070 series, at least on paper. Now, if it will in supply and if it will take market share, who knows? We'll have to wait to see that. Multinatty writes in and says, "Hi Tom, I wonder what your read on the 9070 XT supply will be in early March." Good, I believe good. With many leaks and pictures showing cards already arriving at multiple retailers around the world, I assume that the launch supply would be plenty after a 1 month delay or 2 month delay, isn't it by now? Well, it'll be like 1.5 month. Also, will FSR4 be ready at launch? Seems like it probably will be, at least in beta, but I don't know that for a fact, but that's my hunch. P.S. I might misremember, but it seems like there were more leaks of pictures of 9070 XT boxes than 5090 boxes. I don't know. I think you might be right. Might be easier to find a 9070 XT in a Micro Center backroom than a 5090 right now. Let me see. What other tipped questions do we have here? Um, Let's see. Samuel writes in from the Patreon and says, "Greetings, Tom. For RDNA 4, I feel like there's too much hopium right now. Well, people are desperate. Everything's sold out, and Blackwell's been disappointing. So can you blame them, Samuel?" But continuing his question, "I cannot deny that I'm taking some of that hopium for myself, but I hope in moderation. This generation is meant to be a fix for RDNA 3, as far as I can tell, while also trying to actually take market share, which I don't think is going to happen, but I hope I'm wrong. And I'm just hoping that it is a first step in the right direction to lead us towards UDNA, which I really want to see shine. If UDNA flops, then I would truly start to lose faith in Radeon." Yeah, yeah. I'm not going to get into the like AMD and like the future of it all. That's let's see how RDNA forward goes. Before we start hating or hoping more than we already are. W85, that's funny, says, "Do you think Nvidia will continue to dominate the GPU market with the best products?" Well, how do you define best? The 5070 is looking pretty anemic to me. Um, what does dominate mean? Do I think Nvidia will have most of the GPU market for the foreseeable future? Yes. Let's just leave it. But remember, if AMD gets to 30%, God, even 35% market share, that's huge. They already dominate most of the console market. They're taking laptop market share with their APUs. To get to 35% discrete, let's say, would be shocking for them. I mean, to like get 50% more market share than they have now, that would fund a lot more stuff. I think people need to be reasonable in their expectations. Like AMD doesn't need to get to 60% market share to make a difference. If they got to 35% market share, Nvidia would start to worry, and developers would go, "Okay, well, there's all these APUs. Intel's kind of out of the picture right now, too. So all of these AMD APUs, all of these AMD consoles, all of these AMD handheld devices, and now they're a third of discrete. AMD is actually almost the default by then. So that's what I think AMD's goal needs to be, is to stop pricing things like you can get to 60% market share in one generation like they did 15 years ago and they almost went bankrupt. But also, don't pull that 7900 XT bullshit. Like, don't pull that, oh, $900, but there's 4080 12 gigabyte was going to be 900. Like, they also can't do that. They've got to hit it right. But I personally think, based on what I've seen, assuming FSR4 is pretty much ready at launch and looks good, that 600 and 500, or if they want to be aggressive, actually 600 and 450, 9070 XT, 9070, that's where they need to be to make a big deal. They don't need to be $400, people. They're giving you better than the 5070 Ti and better than the 5070 for lower prices and with more VRAM. But at the same time, if they were to go like 700 and 600, no, I think that would be stupid. So we'll see what they do, though. Duh, 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 duh. Naughty DJ Aftershock writes in and says, "Are you aware of any AMD or Nvidia AI and data center products that are using co-packaged optics in the near future?" Which I think means in the next 2 to 5 years. Supply chain around it is ramping up. Thank you for the tip. This is not something I prepared for this live stream, so I can honestly say, um, I'll tell you, AMD is looking at diversifying the type of packaging they use to help with supply with some upcoming products. I'll give you that. But outside of that, I don't have much else to say. They're not going to make the same mistake of making everything use the same packaging like they have before. Don't worry. All right, let me get through this question here. Let's see, what else do we got? Let's get through these GPU questions. And yeah, then we can move on to APU. Jesse Jaskowiak writes in, longtime supporter of the channel, I'm pretty sure, and goes, "I know high-end RDNA 4 was canceled, but can you imagine if AMD actually had a high-end card this generation, it would have made Nvidia look more than just like greedy chumps that they are. It would have wiped the floor with the 5080 and maybe even nipped at the heels of the 5090. Yeah, I don't know. Seeing the performance of the 5090, I think they would have beaten the 5090 at this point. And I put out a short about this as well, that I feel like if you look at it, and this is something I've talked about multiple times on content recently, like I was told by someone at AMD that Navi 44, that's the 128-bit 32 compute unit, 9060 series card, they designed that and they just flipped it over and they were like, we're done. That's why the 9070 XT die is like a rectangle. They did that so they only had to really pay to design one die. And some of these designs, by the way, I know it seems ridiculous, right? Like, oh, it's all one architecture. There's, NVIDIA GB202 for the 5090 and 203 for the 5080. Maybe they actually did mirror that for that one. Actually, I think there's enough differences they didn't. But I mean, you know, like, but no, actually, that's a good example. Like Nvidia designed the 203 die for the 5070 Ti and 5080, and the 202 die for the 5090. And you'd go, well, how much could that really cost? I mean, tens of millions of dollars. Like to just have a different amount of encoders, to have a different density, because they tend to make the 90 class die have denser compute units that don't clock as fast. Like that cost them a lot to make two different dies, but they have the money to do that and to optimize for something perfectly. AMD taking Navi 44 and just mirroring it saved them tons of money, which is what would allow them to compete with Nvidia. Basically designing one die to make four products that compete with four Nvidia products that Nvidia maybe designed three dies separately for. That's the type of thing you have to do to fight an elephant, and I think it's really smart. But think about it. If they just mirrored 44 to 48, could they have flipped it over again and had like some 700 or more millimeter squared 512-bit card that has GDDR6? I bet they could have, and I bet that would have been closer to beat the 5090 actually, based on what I'm seeing here. Something's just wrong with the scaling there. Of course, might be naive. Who knows? Maybe AMD's have bad scaling problems too. Um, but notice what I'm talking about. I think I saw some reference to like a Navi 52 or something, but like this isn't Navi 4C. This isn't the thing I leaked, over a year ago, the chiplet model. I think the chiplet thing would have crushed the 5090. And I do wonder if AMD looking back on it in hindsight is going, "Mm, could have beat them." Oh well, that's probably what they're thinking right now. Having said that, let's be clear. If Nvidia was actually worried about some chiplet, GPU beating the 5090, they would have made it stronger. They would have given it the full die or close. They would have given it 30 gigabit per second memory like the 5080 has. They would have pushed that thing another 10 or 20% and probably at least made it close and then marketed their features. That's what they did with the 3090. So now the power usage thing, though, I do wonder like if they could have gotten away with doing more, but like let's be clear about that I'm sure AMD is like, oh, I regret it a little bit, but at the same time, let's be honest, Nvidia would have made this bigger if they needed to. They don't like losing. Um which let me see here. Uh yeah, let's go to this question here. Um, Sheriff Lotfee writes in and says, "Hey, Moore's Law Zed, it seems somehow with all the time NVIDIA has had that the software and drivers of the 50 series, especially the 5090 apparently, are not that stable. As seen with the Jay's 2 cents video, at least, and other people reporting breaking with their 5090s, it just seems bizarre, a thing for NVIDIA not to have made sure of before release, considering Blackwell was ready by Q3 of 2024. I mean, maybe even late Q2. What do you think could have happened? Yeah, let's make this. Let me see here. Let's have this and then the timestamp as well. NVIDIA phoning it in. I just think that there's no way around it. NVIDIA seems to have really phoned it in. Like these driver issues, despite the cards coming out well later than they were supposed to come out. I don't know, guys. I think NVIDIA really phoned in Blackwell, and I hope AMD takes advantage of it. Question generated by Jensen GPT writes in, AMD announced a while back that the 9070 XT should have roughly the rasterization performance of a 7900 XT. However, lots of AIB models on display at CES 2025 had massive coolers, and some even had 3 8-pin power connectors. That seems overkill for a GPU with 7900 XT-ish performance with a monolithic die on a better node. Even the most overkill AIB models of the 7900 XT, like the XFX Merc, for example, only had 2 8-pin connectors, while the XTX version of those models had 3. Could this just be a case of AIBs going overkill, or is this possible evidence to back up the performance they seriously put in? It's backs up thing. It backs it up, and I would say this as well. AMD says a lot of things, right? Like, it's like I wouldn't like to them around the performance of the 7900 XT. I mean, what did I leak? That the 9070 XT is probably going to be like 10% more than that. That's around it, right? Like, I think we enthusiasts, especially people that follow this channel or like follow people like Hardware Unboxer or Gamers Nexus, we will get into arguments about 3% performance differences. Every now and then you got to take a step back and understand that no one else professionally does that. Like, no one at AMD is like, it's around a 7900 XT and you're like, it's 11% faster, and they'll go, close enough. I'm an engineer. I'm not some nerd. I'm a nerd, by the way. I'm not just insulting myself. That just argues about single digit performance differences. So no, I don't think them saying that makes a difference. And you know, when you look at the what it say here, AB models of the 7900 XT only had 2 8-pin power connectors. Well, yeah, but I mean, on display had 3 8-pins. Yeah. So look, the benchmarks I leaked came from December with models of the 9070 XT that were consuming 304 watts. If it's consuming 304 watts by default, it's easy to conceive of like a massively overclocked, like, because that would already need 2 8-pins, right? Yeah, so think about it. Uh Jensen GPT. Um, like if it's 304 watts, you already need 2 8-pins. It's very easy to see an AIB pushing up power 20% and just throwing an extra 8-pin on to be safe. So I don't think that really indicates much, except that clearly they can get something out of overclocking this. And I think that'll be exciting to see, which I've also heard this thing. I've heard it might overclock well, but it depends on what the final clocks are on this thing. So, although I guess that's already public, isn't it? I mean, the boxes are at retailers. All right, let us now move on to some APU questions. Make sure I didn't get messaged by anybody crazy here. Okay, let me see. What are we at here? 52 minutes. Strix Halo. All right, Denvero1G1 writes him. Thank you for the tip. And says, did AMD shoot themselves in the foot by dropping DDR5 on Halo for up to 1 TB of unified RAM per node instead of 128 gigabytes for AI? Or do you think that's a Gen 2 thing for Plus, Max, or one Halo to run the same model? Yeah, this is an interesting question. No, I think they're doing what they think makes sense for performance and efficiency. I've still heard, even though we don't have official reviews really yet, that Strix Halo's efficiency, even at idles, is surprising. You get that from that memory. So, uh, no, I think they're happy with what they're doing so far. I think there is an honest question of if they should allow for some other option in the future, but I think 128 gigabytes though is enough, right? Like I know they could go to 192 gigabytes, didn't they say? It's hard for me to not. And then if you're going to go to 192 gigabytes, allowing it, I'm just again, guys, just being honest, not saying I like this fact, but if you're AMD and you control how much RAM is on it, that allows you to make like a 192 gigabyte model, which I believe they said they could do eventually for Strix Halo, and then charge 4 times the price. I mean, and if anyone complains, okay, go get a 24 gigabyte 5090 laptop, nerd, go get that. Like that's what AMD would say. And so I think they believe it's worth it for the packaging, like reducing the size in a laptop so it can fit in things like the Asus ROG, was it Flow 13 or whatever. But then also, so if you have that 192 gigabyte model eventually, or even a 128 gigabyte model, they control it. You don't get to have someone selling it like the cheap model, right? Like, what if someone was selling it can be cut down all the way to 16 compute units. What if someone was selling the 16 compute unit model with no RAM in the laptop, and then you threw in 256 gigabytes? It is better for business for AMD to say, hey, you need to get this super laptop with the 192 gigabytes if you want it. So, I don't think AMD believes they shot themselves in the foot, although it would certainly be cool if there was some upgradable option for something like this with one of their products in the future. All right, let's see here. Um, Judy Nader writes in and says, "Do you think that the RTX 5000 series being on 3 nanometer, were it to actually have been on 3 nanometer, would we have seen a bigger performance increase?" Yeah, yeah, and I talked to someone at Nvidia years ago about Ampere. This was someone that reached out pretty high up that just wanted to, talk to me and like clear up misconceptions, let me pick their brain without leaking anything. But like maybe the person didn't tell me the 6000 series plans for Nvidia, but I was allowed to ask questions like, uh, did you seriously consider TSMC for Ampere like I thought you did? And the person's like, yeah. And I'm like, how much better would a 7 nanometer Ampere series have been? And they were like, yeah, look, it'd be 10% faster and use 20% less energy, but cost more. So would the 5000 series on 3 nanometer have been a bigger performance increase? Yes. Although I will say 8 nanometer to 7 nanometer is a bigger leap than 4 to 3. So my suspicion would have been, yeah, my suspicion would actually be it'd be like 5% faster because that's not really the issue with 4 nanometer. But yeah, I think it would have used like 20% less power. It would have been probably the same power consumption of Lovelace. Would be what I would suspect with a slightly higher performance uplift. So it would have been more impressive though for sure. There's no way around that. All right, let me scroll up because YouTube does this annoying thing sometimes. All right, there we go. Da-da-da-da-da. All right, let me get on to another APU question here. Uh, Killing God writes in, Tom, would you rather have the next version of Strix Halo or the new NVIDIA APU in your next laptop? I'd rather have Medusa Halo. I've got an idea of how much more performance it will be. From what I'm hearing, again, it's not like I've cross-referenced this with a bunch of sources yet. So don't quote me to the letter here on exactly, but my suspicion is that Medusa Halo is going to be more like a 30 to 40, 50% performance uplift, not a doubling of performance where they go to 80 compute units and 384-bit. At least right now, that's not what I'm hearing. Could be wrong. I haven't put a leak card up, but I'm starting to get some whispers about compute unit count and stuff. Even if it was just 20 to 40% faster than Strix Halo, I think I'll be a lot more efficient. It should have 24 Zen 6 cores, so way better CPU. That's in Strix Point. I'm sorry, Strix Halo, 50% more cores. I think I'd rather have that than the Nvidia APU. The Nvidia APU that they're telling their reps about right now, for the most part, sounds like a 5070 laptop competitor, maybe even a little weaker. Now, granted, it's a chiplet family, so maybe there's some bigger model, but at least for now, I'd want the x86 Medusa Halo. I'm not getting NVIDIA. I'm not getting an NVIDIA APU until I think the second gen. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be impressed and I'll buy it. I'll be here. Here's my NVIDIA laptop. Holy crap. But I would want a full gen to make sure this thing works with ARM on Windows. Wouldn't everyone here, like, write in below, like, write in the live chat, wouldn't you? Like, and I know that Medusa Halo should be at least 20 to 40% faster than, I think. Well, let's say at least 20% faster than Strix Halo. And I think that's enough for me in a laptop, honestly. And to have the rock solid stability that I believe it will have, I would take that over Nvidia for the time being. But could be wrong. I'm ready for Nvidia to prove me wrong, to bring competition to APUs and laptops that Intel isn't bringing right now. So second generation, I don't know. Maybe I'll have an Nvidia laptop. Uh, duh, duh, duh. All right, let's see here. Eric Winberg writes in, thanks, Tom, and the Moore's Law's Dead team. All right, let's go now to a timestamp, which we will call building advice. There's always some building advice questions. So, Nemesis 12 writes in and says, can you recommend the 9950 X3D, and I was hoping a 5090, for production and animation and rendering? Maximizing Threadripper is not a budget for me. Yes, although if it's for rendering, I would recommend the 9950X. Like, you can get pretty good deals. Let me pull up Micro Center here since they are sponsoring us. And I just have it actually. So yeah, it's 560 right now at Micro Center, and they have deals on pairing motherboards with it. I would just get a 9950X, man. Like, that's what I would get for production. It's very, very good multi-threading performance. I believe as more apps use AVX 512, Zen 5 is going to age maybe not as much of an uplift as Zen 4 was, but better than it is now. I think it's going to age pretty well. So I would just get the 9950X and ignore the X3D if this is mostly for production. I know everyone loves the X3D, but if it's for work and that's what you want, you're paying dollar to make back dollars, the X3D probably isn't going to help with that. And guys, this is going to be strong enough to run games. Like it's, we have to remember that the 9800 X3D is like in the stratosphere of performance, and that the 9950 X3D will probably age to be slightly below the 7800 X3D in gaming long term, because the newer architecture tends to catch up to the old X3D. Well, like I believe the 90, not the 9700, the 7700X is now faster than the 5800 X3D in gaming on average. So 9950 X3D, I mean, non X3D will be enough. I would just go for that. All right. And remember, check out Micro Center for the 9950X. All right, let me see what else we have here. I think we had another question regarding, oh, that's right, DLSS and stuff too. Uh let's continue these questions. I'll get back to that one. Insanity's Rain writes in and says, "Hey Tom, I thought I'd commit some tech heresy for this channel and ask a cringe question." Let me pull. Oh, thanks. I love that my phone makes me unlock it every now and then. I'd commit. Let's see here. With the new generation of GPUs coming out and the market shifting as it always does, what parts would you recommend for a $1,000 PC? Actually, I think I can easily answer this one. I have one around here. Let me do this since they also sponsor the channel. Generally speaking, it's a boring answer. It's a very, very boring answer. But if you really wanted to do $1,000 PC for the best price performance, probably just get something from Minis for him. Like I don't know what to tell you. Like I forgot what this one costs right now. I still have to test it and do an ad for it, but this thing comes with a 4060. I know that's not impressive, and it comes with a 16 core Zen 4 CPU for I believe under $1,000. You can even upgrade it's a low profile 4060, so you'll be able to upgrade it sometimes in the future. Or right now, and they're not sponsoring me in this video. Actually, I'm just doing this because it is my opinion. Like something like this, I think Wendell at Level 1 Text just did a video about it. This thing from from Minis Forum. I'll put a link in the description as well. I'll put down a note for that Minis Forum link, because I do have a sponsored link for them. So wait for an hour from now if you want to get this. But like if you're doing a $1,000 PC, you can get something like this motherboard from Minis Forum for like $400 to $500. And what does it come with? A 16 core Zen 4 CPU that allows for good cooling. I used a system with one of those for a few months while my desktop was being repaired last year. And ultimately, everybody, I mean, look, it ran over 100 watts. It ran above 5 gigahertz with all 16 cores. No, it can't go 5.7 gigahertz quite. It doesn't go 5.5 gigahertz all core at 200 watts. But you're getting 95% of a 7950X for less than the price of a 7950X, and you're getting the motherboard, and some of them come with the cooling and the Wi-Fi. That's what you got to do. Look, if you want good price performance, I know it's fun to select every single part. Get one of these motherboards and then get, unfortunately, the GPU market's a bit of a crapshoot right now compared to where it was a year ago. But I mean, come on, there's got to be something. What does a 6800 XT sell for or something on eBay? Like that's still, those prices are going up a bit too. But yeah, look, if you wanted a $1,000 PC, ultimately, I'd probably be bargain hunting for like a $450 7800 XT. Wait for RDNA 4 maybe. And then just get one of those motherboards in a cheap case. Again, it's a mobile processor that runs at like 100 or 200, 1 to 200 watts. So you're saving energy most, because like when you're not running it at 100%, which you're almost never running your processor at 100%, it does use less energy than the AM5 variant. And you can throw the whole thing together for $1,000. You're basically saving $500 by getting one of those. So it's not a sexy answer, but if you wanted to do it for 1,000, I'll put a link in the description. I'd get one of those motherboards, and I wouldn't feel bad about it at all. And then I would just, if you can find an RX 6800 16 GB for 350, get that. You got a whole PC here that's, gonna in some games get you at least, well, some games you'll beat the PS5 Pro because half of them aren't patched, but you'll get to that level of performance you would want for mid-range to high-end gaming, and a lot cheaper than if you did everything yourself. And that's just the situation right now, is that some of these products that are pre-built are cheaper than going do it yourself occasionally. And so that's why I would recommend them. Also, it's just easier, like now you don't have to assemble as many things. You have direct support and warranty on stuff together. Yeah. Mahir Pathik writes in and says, do you know why OEMs are not already partnering with better cooling technologies like floors, air jets, not just for laptops, but even for GPUs? It would easily offset a lot of the heat and throttling concerns. So I'm kicking myself right now under the table because I don't remember which guest it was, but I believe a year ago I had some guest on with this air jet cooler that talked about why. Oh, I think it was a die shrink. Um, with Carbon Cry after Hot Chips, looking at some of these exotic coolers or something, and contributor to the channel and sometimes guest on Die Shrink, again, which you get access to for just $2 a month on the Patreon. Um, a lot of them have some drawbacks, I don't remember what they were exactly, but there are drawbacks to them, and there would be a reason somebody is not using them, right? Like, they're not stupid. There would be a reason. Um, but yeah, I think we'll see more exotic cooling come to stuff in the near future, though, still. High Powered writes in, thank you for the tip. Any thoughts on potential performance gains with Nvidia and AMD with their new GPUs for VR? No, I think no one cares about VR right now in that industry. Sorry, like, people have so much bandwidth, so much brain space, and they're not thinking about VR a lot right now, from what I can tell. AMD has a serious lead with their X3D CPUs, giving noticeable gains for VR. Yeah, cool. I don't think so, though. We'll see what happens with VR right now. Yeah, I think there's a lot of focus being put on that. Mr. Reinterpret Cast writes in and says, rant. He warned us, everybody. Some games run like absolute dog shit today. If this is all that Nvidia has to bring, then game developers should optimize more. Fake frames just to get by is just unbelievable. Yeah, fake frames are stupid. Please bring John Carmack back. Yeah, I mean, look, I have a lot of game developers on. I might have another one on next week, or at least very soon. So you'll get plenty of chances to ask these people questions about optimization. Actually, I think I might have a game developer on next week. We'll see. I have other guests. I'm waiting for them to respond to me to be the next guest. But yeah, maybe I will do the game developer next, because the Kingdom Come Deliverance stuff makes me think that it might be time to have a game dev on again and ask what they think about all this. Techno Lads writes in, off to sleep. I'm excited for RDNA 4 and UDNA. Keep it up. Thank you, Techno Lads. That is a patron. All right, let me see here. Let me do a GPU question here. Let's do some FSR and DLSS stuff before we go back to the Zen 6 questions that I can see are popping up now in the live stream chat. So let me put down a timestamp. Let me see. DLSS, FSR, Helldivers. Yes, I saw the Helldivers tweets, everybody. Hi, Tom. I've been playing too much Helldivers 2 lately, and the TAA leaves a lot to be desired. Digital Foundry said that they wished Helldivers 2 had FSR to solve this, though it's unlikely due to Helldivers 2 using the Autodesk Stingray engine that's been discontinued since. I wonder if you think it would be a good marketing strategy for AMD to seek out popular games that don't have either side's upscaling methods and lend support to implement it, so that more gamers will see them use FSR, devaluing the mindshare advantage DLSS has. Yes, but I'm going to level with you. I believe AMD and Nvidia already try to do stuff like that, right? Like, they go in and they try to find these games. They do. And so if the Helldivers devs aren't using them, it's because they don't want to. And I believe some Helldivers devs said as much on Twitter. And I'm not going to get into defending it or attacking their decision. Listen to the Alderaan Games episode. Listen to times Brian Heemskirk's been on Broken Silicon. There are reasons devs sometimes don't like upscaling. Okay. And I'm not going to say it's the good or the bad of it all, but it does cost indie devs a lot sometimes to add it. And some games have been canceled because of it. But we'll leave it at that. But to answer the question again, they're already trying to do that. So if a dev, it's not like every dev, but Most of the time, if a dev doesn't have it, it's probably because they didn't want it. Jake Storms writes in and says, any clues yet as if Zen 6 goes to a big IO die GPU chiplet setup? If there are a few GPU sizes and maybe even faster IO memory buses for some of these chips for DGPU. Yeah, I already answered you, my friend. The opening leak. Yes. Zen 6, the Medusa family, apparently. Medusa Desktop, Medusa Halo, Medusa Ridge, Medusa Range, or what would that be? Hydra Range would be a cool name. I would actually know the name. That's what I would name it if I was at AMD. All of those are chiplets. All of them seem to be capable of using the same, probably, I believe, 3 nanometer. And there also are 2 nanometer variants, though, at least right now in design. Chiplets. And yes, those are different IO dies, right? There's the Halo IO die that will be, I believe over 300 millimeters squared, probably, um, with more than 40 compute units, I believe. There will be the Medusa Point that is using the same chiplets, but just one 12-core chiplet instead of two that the Halo uses, but then a around 200 millimeter squared IO die. Again, I'll be leaking a lot more information about the exact specifics in a week or so. Um, Probably still 16 compute units though. And then there will be the Medusa Ridge with an even smaller IO die, but maybe a little bigger than last time. With two chiplets, two CPU chiplets for 24 cores for whatever it is, the Medusa range. Maybe it'll just be called Medusa range. Actually, who knows? Maybe they don't need a Hydra range. Maybe it's Medusa range and Medusa Ridge. So yes, that is what they're doing. If you're thinking about it, I just listed 3 different IO die sizes for like 5 different products, and it wouldn't surprise me uh if there was a little Medusa, right? A little Medusa IO die as well. But then I would suspect there'd be some 8-core or 6-core, like 2+4 model as well for the chiplets. We'll have to see. But absolutely, they're doing it. They have at least 3 different IO dies that I know of for Medusa and at least a couple different chiplets. So they're going to be mixing and matching. It'll be interesting. And again, thank you for the tip. Let's see what we got here. So there's that question. All right. Mr. Reinterpret Cast writes in. Make sure you're part of the Patreon. You can ask these questions there as well. But I thank you for all of the tipped questions, of course. If I'm not in a rush, should I wait for the 9950 X3D versus getting the 9950X? I do development with VMs plus AI. What do you think the 5090 supply would look like in March? Better, but not great. So I answer that question first. The 5090 supply, better, but not great. Well, how do I put this? Maybe I shouldn't say better. 5090 supply in March, they will have more. I don't know if the actual situation will be better than how it feels now, but they're shipping more for March or April. So that's all I can say about the 5090 supply. As for so look, you need to look up the individual benchmarks that you do because you just say AI, you say VMs. I don't know what exact app you're using. And if you tell me, I won't know the performance off the top of my head. Like, but I suspect the 9950X will be good enough for you. Wait to get the 9950 X3D if there's a specific app that somehow really benefits from Vcache. Well, it's only on one chiplet, unfortunately. Or if you do a ton of gaming on it, and for some reason you need to game at 240 hertz, which for some reason maybe you have a 240 hertz monitor. That would be the reason. I don't know why I said it that way. So if you're gaming at 240 hertz, X3D makes sense to me. If you're not, I don't think the 9950X is going to get bogged down below 144 hertz for a long time. And that is why I just recommend getting that now if you want to build now. Let's see. And then we have another question, I believe, here from Denvera1G1. It says, do you think Halo is business focused like other APUs where the GPU is bus bottlenecked in gaming? Maybe, but I think it will be less bottlenecked than Strix Point, right? To me, it seems like Strix Point didn't really need more than 12 compute units, but they went for 16 for a multitude of reasons. Um, and if you think about it, then Strix Halo, doesn't it have 8,000 mega transfer memory or something? What does it have? Strix Halo. Well, let's just do this. It'll be AI. What is it called? AI. Was it 395 max or something ridiculous? These freaking stupid names. Max plus 395. All right. So if I look at the specifications on AMD's website here, let's see. Graphics. Where's the memory? Come on. Tell me connectivity. All right, there it is. LPDDR5X8000, which is below what I was initially told, by the way. I was told 8533 mega transfer. But so if you think about it, Strix Point, not always, I've seen it faster now, but Strix Point usually comes with 7500. This is 8000. So it has faster memory, double the bus width, and infinity cache. So in terms of effective bandwidth, we're probably looking at what, 3, 4 times the effective bandwidth of Strix Point. So I think it could have some memory bottlenecks potentially, but at the same time, you're doubling the bus using faster RAM and adding infinity cache. That's going to be way less bandwidth bottlenecked in games than Strix Point is. And so I don't really have a lot of concerns about it. And that is why I think Strix Halo in a lot of games is probably going to be triple the performance of Strix Point, if not more, because you're removing that bandwidth bottleneck to a large degree. Uh, duh, duh, duh. Let me see here. All right, so that is all of the tipped questions. I believe we got through all of the pre-submitted questions. And then, all righty, so let me put that there. What was that other link I said I was going to put in the description? Oh, that's right. I needed to put in the minis 4-in-1. But so, all right, I'll probably do this for another 10 to 15 minutes. If you're in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord and the after video chat section, put in your questions now, for free. If you're a patron, remember, you can become a patron for free by clicking on the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon, just joining the lowest tier, and then you can submit questions there. Or if you want to submit questions in the live chat right now, put in those final questions. And let me see if there's anything else you guys have. I'm looking at the live chat, everybody. Let's see. Mine triple channel. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of think AMD is going to stick with dual channel for AM5 for now, guys. Let's see. Would love to hear about the next Threadripper. I mean, there's not much to say, right? It's going to be Zen 5 up to 96 cores, probably. Well, though, because if it's Zen 5 or 128 cores, maybe I forgot what they're going to go to, but it's going to be really expensive. You know what it's going to be. Look at Zen 5 Epic. That's what it's going to be, but cheaper and miss a couple features. Let's see. Any updates on Apple's Ultra M4? No, I don't know anything about that right now. Will the GPU prices continue to be shitty for the rest of the year? Ask what people are going to do with tariffs. That's a big old self-own that's going on right now with pricing. Dragon Balls D writes in and says, does RDNA 5 use chiplets? We know why RDNA 4 didn't. It almost did, but it sounds like RDNA 5 was also scaled back. I'm curious how it might differ from RDNA 3 packaging. Let me put timestamp here. RDNA 5 whispers. So does RDNA 5 use chiplets? There's some designs that do. I've talked to someone at AMD recently at RDNA 5. There is at least I don't want to say plan, because Radeon seems to be making some very big strategic changes lately in how they do things. But if they want to launch an MI300 like big old chiplet RDNA 5, they already have laid the groundwork to do that. So anyone telling you they can't or they won't, they might. They might go for it again. AMD does this. AMD goes only mid-range. Think of it, Polaris. You had Polaris in the 5700 XT, the 4870, the 3870, the 5870, really. AMD goes just mid-range like every other generation for their whole history. Like, this is not weird that AMD doesn't make a high-end card. They've done this like most generations in Radeon's history, going all the way back to even ATI. But if they want to compete, they can. And they certainly have the design for some crazy chiplet thing for RDNA 5 if they want to launch that, contrary to what some people have told you. They certainly have. I'm not telling you they will launch that, though. Still a bit too soon to say. Jake Storms writes in, thank you for the tip. It says, when I say fat IO memory, I'm wondering if some Medusa IO chiplets will support more memory channels and PCI lanes for something somewhat Threadripper, but soldered on. Can't say yet. We'll leave it at that. Yeah, let's leave it at that. I believe it uses a new socket, though. I believe it does. Don't quote me on that. I believe it might use a new socket. So it is bigger, but I don't know if it's like crazy bigger, Let me see here. Looking for question marks. Is it RDNA 5 or UDNA? Ugh. Is it RDNA 5 or UDNA? From what I can gather, the decision hasn't been completely made, and it's half of it's just marketing if you're calling it UDNA yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's RDNA 5 and then they do UDNA. Depends how much they can merge over the next 2 years. That's what I would say. Um, I'm hoping the 9070 XT is at the 580 level. Yeah, I think it's going to lose to the 580, but it'd be interesting if AIB models overclock to the same level. Oh, the 5080 is also a good overclocker. So, Denvera 1G1 says, thanks, Tom. That was my question. I was worried that 3 times the CUs. Well, it's not 3 times, right? It's 2.5 times the CUs, but only 2 times the bus. Yeah, so 2.5 times the CUs, but double the bus. Like, what is it? 5%, something around there, 5 to 10% more memory speed. So already you're getting close to like 2.2 times the bandwidth. And then add infinity cache, you're like at 3 times the bandwidth with 2.5 times the CUs effectively. Could be some bottlenecks there, but I don't think it'll be as bad. I am in for jackpot. Do you think the 9070 series will catch up at least to RTX 4000 ray tracing? I think it's possible in some scenarios. Look, I've said this before. Let me put down a timestamp for this. I've said this before multiple times, but I think there will be scenarios where NVIDIA still crushes AMD in ray tracing this generation, especially if the game is built for NVIDIA. Like, look, Alan Wake 2, that's like an NVIDIA showcase game that clearly sees AMD as an afterthought, even on console, which is weird. What they've done to the console performance with low resolutions, turning up ray tracing too much for RDNA 2 graphics cards and the consoles is just so silly. I don't know why they did that, but you know, games like that, I think AMD will make the biggest improvements in those types of games, but there's still ones where NVIDIA might have an edge. Not all the time. Cyberpunk benchmarks I've seen for RDNA 4 are very encouraging, by the way, with ray tracing turned up. But I think while there will be some outliers, I also have seen multiple games where the 9070 XT is beating the 4070 Ti Super. And I don't know, Blackwell seems to be a 5 to 10% regression in ray tracing performance at the same level of raster. And because of that, like think about what I just leaked about the 5070. It seems like it's like maybe at best 4070 super performance or like halfway to that, but barely better ray tracing than the 4070. So the ray tracing uplift isn't keeping pace with the raster uplift this gen with NVIDIA. Because of that, when you say, will they at least catch up to RTX 4000 ray tracing? What do you mean? Do you mean in absolute terms? I mean, they're not going to beat the 4090 in ray tracing, but yeah, I don't know. They might beat the 4070 Ti Super. But if NVIDIA's ray tracing per raster is lower, it might be pretty close to Blackwell in a lot of games, which is the craziest thing to me if that ends up happening. So we'll have to wait for third-party reviews. Again, as always, when I'm leaking things, I see maybe a dozen benchmarks. They're not 50 benchmarks at Tech Power Up or Hardware Unbox, but from what I've seen, they could be pretty close in ray tracing this generation to NVIDIA, which is, again, I just did not see that happening. I thought RDNA 4 would mostly catch up. I didn't think it'd be this close. But we'll have to see. Again, we need third-party reviews here. What do you think about supply of 9070 series compared to NVIDIA's 508090? Way more supply than those cards. Yeah. 5070, I don't know, but more for 5090. I mean, come on. Is the 9070 XT going to be at a 4080 level? It seems like it will be to me. But remember, the 4080 raster is weaker than the XTX. So I think, yeah, kind of averaging around XTX or 4080 performance, depending on the average. If the average has a lot of ray tracing, it will on average maybe look better than the XTX. If there's no ray tracing, the average will probably look closer to like beating the 4080, but losing to the XTX and raster. So yeah, but 4080 level, yes. Yes. And the Moore's Law is dead hierarchy chart. It should be at the same level. I've already actually updated it to include the 9070 XT. Actually, let me pull that out as well. I did just update the Moore's Law is dead GPU chart, and I'll even put it in the live chat. I'll look at it. Moore's Law is dead does spend a lot of time every now and then updating this chart to give you advice on graphics cards, what resolutions you should use them at, the relative performance to each other. Again, that costs money. Please support us on Patreon. This is a lot of work, you know. But there is that. If you want to know how I think these cards will compare, I have already added RDNA 4 to the chart. And if there's a surprise, I'll change it. Is it worth going from a 9900K to a 12700K? Yeah, it's a lot stronger. Yeah, yeah. Discord link, you have to join the Patreons too. Lowest tier gets you access. But remember, we have to have moderators. This again, all of this takes time and effort and money to do. The stuff at Moore's Law is dead. I bet 3 nanometer is too expensive. Yeah, well, that's not really why Nvidia did it. 4 nanometer though. Yeah, talking about. Let's see. Any final questions? Checking the Discord. See, Carbon Cry is doing a big ol' spiel. No questions there. Pregnant Freddy Krueger writes in, hopefully not haunting any people's dreams anymore, now that he is pregnant, and says $599 for a 9070 XT makes sense to me if it's slapping the goofy out of 5070 Ti, meaning 10 to 50% faster, while being 20% cheaper. Yeah, I mean, if the 5070 Ti, from what I'm hearing, is like 10% faster than the 4070 Ti Super, and this is the 9070 XT is like 5% faster than a 4080, or maybe even the same performance. Yeah, you're looking 10 to 20% faster than a 5070 Ti for 20% less money, or more than 20% less. That seems like a bargain at $600 to me. I mean, maybe I'll close it out like this. All of you people in the live chat right now, I'm really curious. This has been one of the ongoing debates in the Moore's Law is Dead Discord here. Again, please join the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon and join that Discord. But like, I'm curious what you people think of the live chat here, because we have over 1,500 people watching. If the 9070 XT is 10% faster than the 5070 Ti for 25% less money, is that good? We're assuming the drivers are stable, even though Blackwells don't seem to be. We're assuming ray tracing pretty much catches up. You know, maybe 5% weaker, but no one complains about it anymore. We're assuming FSR4 is good. I think some people in the Moore's Laws Dead Discord might want to look at these reactions here, because some people think it needs to be cheaper than that. And I'm sorry, giving you almost 5080 performance for half the price of a 5080 seems like good enough to me. And I say half the price because the 5080 is not a $1,000 card, everybody, is it? No, it isn't. Come on. It's selling for $1,200-$1,400 and it doesn't even exist. $500 are dead on arrival. All right, there's one person. But I think the person who says $500 or less are dead on arrival should look at the comments. You think AMD needs to charge less than half as much as Nvidia for about the same performance when you can't even buy the Nvidia card. I would argue if that was true, AMD shouldn't launch the card. Then they shouldn't launch it, because no one will buy it no matter how good it is. Because at that point, at that point you're basically like, well, it should be $10, in my opinion. 550 seems fair, but 600 is what it will be. I think it could be 650. I mean, that would still be $100 less than the 5070 Ti, while being 10 to 20% stronger. Right? In what world are we where we're like, let me put it in perspective. That would be like if the 7900 XTX, that would be like if that was $900 and 10% stronger, right? Because then it would be have been faster than the 4080, notably, and 25% cheaper. If the 7900 X6 was $900 at launch and 10% faster than the 4080, that's what it'd be like if the 9070 XT was like 600, in my opinion. So, all right, and now here's where it gets funny though. Everyone seems to keep forgetting this. Everyone hyperventilates about the 9070 XT. But hear me out. If the 9070, there's another card. It's not just the 9070 XT. Let me know your opinions in the live chat right now. If the 9070 is 20% faster than the 5070, has 4 gigabytes more VRAM, actually beats it in ray tracing, and is $500, is that fair? That's $50 less than the 5070. That's 20% more performance. Same or better ray tracing. Like, Because I've seen some people arguing about this, and I'm just like, what am I missing that you could possibly think it needs to be cheaper? Like it's, and I don't know the price, right? AMD will decide that last minute. See, but that's the funny thing. Everyone seems even more so to be enthusiastically saying yes right now to the 9070. Guys, pretend the 9070 XT doesn't exist. Pretend it doesn't exist. 9070 500 beats the 5070 by 20%, even maybe matches it or beats in ray tracing, $50 less. That's fair? Then isn't the 9070 XT a cherry on top? Right? Like we everyone hyperventilates about AMD needs a good $500 card. What if that's the 9070? Like, why does it have to be the XT? The XT seems like an almost 5080 competitor. Forget that. That's a bonus. But all right, I feel less crazy here. Someone says 450 is the price. To be honest, if AMD has the volume and the room to do it, I think 600 450 is what they should do. That'd be what I would say. If they can do it. I don't know for sure. Because at 450 you're undercutting the 5070 by a very marketable amount. $100, baby. A Benjamin, you could say. $100 off, better performance, more RAM. And then you could go up the stack, $100 off or maybe $150 off the 5070 Ti, you know, 10-20% better, like same amount of RAM. I think that's what you would do. 450 600 if they can pull it off. But I think 500 600 500 650 is even fair. So when is the 9070 XTX? Oh, not the XT? I don't know. I haven't heard any reference to an XTX yet. Don't get me wrong. I wish there was an XTX with 32 gigabytes overclocked to 5080 performance for like $700, but I just haven't heard about one. I think that would be a slam dunk if they launched it, though. I really do. The 9080 XT. I don't know. It's basically the same card. You could call it the 9080 XT. Maybe they would. Any crumbs on the 9060 XT? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I already leaked it. The 9060 XT should be, I mean, let me pull up. I do the math quick. Let's do 80 power up. Probably, I would guess 60% to 65% the performance of the big card. So that puts it at, yeah, wow. Yeah, I mean, look, I think the 9060 series is probably going to be around 7700 XT performance. Yeah, and that would probably, what price would it be at? I'm guessing 300 to 400, depending on the model. So, well, we have at least 5 minutes to put the 9070 XT in our cart. I will say this actually too before I go. Put a timestamp to this. This is a fun part here. RDNA 4 pricing. So pricing poll. So when you ask me this question, everybody, of will I have 5 minutes to put the 9070 XT in my cart? A few months ago, I would have said probably. Now I can never know, right? Because it's supply and demand and a demand. It's not just about supply. If everyone on earth wants it, billions of people will make it sell out in 10 seconds. So I don't know. I can never be 100% sure, but I would have said probably. The problem is that there's no supply of any other mid-range or high-end graphics card right now. And so I suspect the 9070 XT is going to sell out instantly because it has no competition. Everyone keeps talking about how the 5090 doesn't have competition. Fuck that. 9070 XT doesn't have competition if Nvidia is not supplying us with graphics cards. So I wouldn't be surprised if the 9070 XT is hard to get as well. Difference being, though, maybe you'll have 10 seconds instead of 1 second because there'll actually be cards on the shelves. But I think that thing's probably going to sell out quickly if it manages to hit its performance goals. I'm sorry, I just think it will. I mean, I just did basically a poll here with you guys on if $600 is fair, and it was like 100 to 1. Yes, that means the thing's going to sell out because I think that's probably around where it will cost. Jonathan Harris writes in and says the 9070, thank you for the tip, should make a 5070 dead on arrival, maybe not at 500. But if they can squeeze it 450, I think 500. They're not going to be $400, dude. It's a 7900 XT in performance. Why would it be $400? Are they a charity? I'm sorry, like that's just nuts. If they need to sell it for the same price, So you're saying they need to sell something 50% faster than the 7700 XT for less than what the 7700 XT was? No, I don't think so. I think 500 would be fair and 450 would be very generous. Um, 5070 will probably trade blows with a 4070 Super. I don't know. The benchmarks I just was told about were pretty depressing. I think people are going to be pretty disappointed in the 5070, everybody. Will there be a 24 gigabyte 5080 with the new 3 gigabyte modules? Mm, yes, it's called the 5090 laptop edition. The 5090 laptop edition is a 5080 24 gigabyte. So I think to answer, like, I don't think they would really want to do that on desktop unless they have to. Does RDNA 4 support GDDR7? I don't think it does, to my memory. I know they considered using it, but I don't think it does. A weird thing I was told is that Lovelace, like the 4090, might have supported GDDR7, by the way. We never saw a card that used it, but I was told it might have. Are we talking about fake or real MSRP? Well, I mean, I'm not going to get into what that even means, 9060 GRE. I don't know. I don't know why they keep doing this GRE nonsense, except that it sells well in China if you put the GRE badge on it for some reason. Helso Zero says it's kind of weird how little GDDR7 improved on things. I don't think that's GDDR7's fault. Um, Someone says, no, no, it wouldn't be a 9060 GRE. It'd be a 9650 GRE. I hope not. RDNA 2 gained market share and not really. It didn't really gain market share, actually. But that's not really RDNA 2's fault. Nvidia just had unlimited Samsung 8 nanometer crap supply. All right. Let me make sure I'm not missing one here. Seems like I've answered all of the questions. Oh, one more question. Here we go. Unless I see others pop up right now. Denvera G1 writes in, were you as surprised as I was when the 40 series was a repeat of the 600/1000 series, meaning small dies and buses? 600 and 1000. Oh, I see what you mean, like Pascal and Kepler. But 50 series wasn't a repeat of the 700/2000. Hmm. I think it is kind of a repeat of the 2000 series, just not as good, isn't it? Like, it is a repeat. Like, Turing went to giant die sizes over 700 millimeters squared. Same thing happened with Blackwell. They went from GDDR5X to GDDR6. This time it's GDDR6X to GDDR7. It is a repeat of Turing. It is. I think it is a repeat of Turing. Actually, hear me out here. I put a timestamp on this one. I would directly argue that Blackwell is a repeat of Turing because we all may fawn over DLSS right now, but does anyone remember how junk DLSS was at launch? It was garbage. DLSS 1 was, I mean, I remember Tim at Hardware Unboxed finding that just using resolution scaling gave you more performance for better image quality. DLSS 1 was a joke. Ray tracing was a joke. Call me crazy, but for the time, DLSS 1 was about as useful as multi-frame generation now. So I actually do think that Blackwell is directly comparable to Turing. What's so funny is just like with Turing, AMD is not competing in the high end this time. But what also happened with the 5700 XT, it managed to surprise everybody and almost hit 2080 performance. Maybe AMD will almost hit 5080 as well. And the 5000 series actually took market share. The 6000 didn't, to my knowledge. Jonathan Harris writes in, thanks for all that you do. Well, thank you for the tip. Nvidia mindshare people only want cheap AMD to buy Nvidia at a lower price. I wish the 9070 at 500 would be enough, but gotta kill that mindshare first. We'll see. We'll see. I think we've hit that horse to death here with like pricing so far in this episode. Uh, we'll see. We'll see what happens with mindshare market share with RDNA 4. We will see. Denvera G1 writes in again, I see your point. I was mostly talking about die size and bus. 5090 is only a die and bus increase. Everything else seems to be the same size as last gen. Yeah, I mean, sure. But I stand by what I said. I don't know. It's just a what you're describing is just a byproduct of Nvidia milking gamers even harder. It's really a similar situation though. Nothing's ever exactly the same. Um, let's see here. See again, someone here, Anon writes in and says the 9070 XT has to be 550 to force a direct comparison to the 5070 and make Nvidia look stupid. Pretend the 9070 XT doesn't exist. Pretend the 9070 XT doesn't exist, Anon. There's still the 9070 that would be $500. That's better than what you said. That's better. That will be the comparison. You're not people, get it through your head. The 9070 XT is not a 5070 competitor. It's a 5070 curb stomping destroyer, crushing its family's history into the ground. It is way stronger than the 5070. No, the 9070 is what you will compare to the 5070, and if that was $500, it'd be $50 cheaper. So, to quote you, Anon, if you want to force a direct comparison, you're saying AMD should price the 9070 at 550. There you go. It will be stronger. It will be the same price. Then there's your direct comparison. If you want a direct comparison, stop bringing up the XT. The XT is not the same level of performance, and even then, the 9070 is more RAM than the 5070. Did I already cover Zen 6? I did. Sorry, I'm just getting worried. I wish there was a way for me to erase from people's heads that the knowledge a XT will exist. And then if we just pretend the 9070 is a 7900 XT for $500, all of a sudden you already have your 5070 killer. And then the other one should be compared to the more expensive card. Um, You think waiting for a 5080 Ti is good? No, I don't. How soon will 16 gigabytes be not enough? Not enough for 16 gigabytes is going to be enough for most things for a while. But look, I mean, 16 gigabytes is going to be in AMD's mid-range generation. It's mid-range now. 16 gigabytes is not high end. The 5080 should have 24 gigabytes. 16 gigabytes is mid-range. It is. People are expecting some AMD charity. It's bold but unrealistic. Yeah, okay. All right. I think on that note, we can end this one here. Thank you for watching. I am obviously getting tired here. Please like the video. Double check all 1,600 of you. Please, right now, double check you're subscribed to the Moore's Law YouTube channel. Do that. Ring the bell button. And if you missed the leak I just put out about Zen 6, where I show a picture of it, restart the live stream and go watch that. I also have stuff about 5070 Ti supply. You're going to want to make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the multiple Zen 6 bombshell videos I'm planning to do over the next month or so. So subscribe there. And again, support Moore's Law is Dead on Patreon. You'll get access to a die shrink that just came out, ranking GPUs going over the Moore's Law is Dead ranking chart that you can find in the description once this is done on the mooreslawisdead.com website. So that was a very good die shrink. Again, lowest tier gets you access to that. The Discord, you can ask us questions. We'll have a guest on again in a week. And yeah, I guess as I always say, though, no matter what, thank you for watching if you are watching, and have a great weekend, everybody.